Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. So, what happened in Minneapolis, St. Paul back in the spring has obviously had a huge impact. And so I wanted to check in with a friend of mine who runs a business in Minneapolis, and she's connected me up with one of her friends who runs a business in downtown Minneapolis. So I'd like to introduce you to Summer Kath, and Summer is the Executive Vice President and Head of Business Development for Cambria. Cambria, we're going to hear about. It's a company that does quartz countertops and has a great facility here in downtown Toronto that I've hosted some events at. And Summer will hopefully tell us a little bit about that and about what's happened to her business during COVID-19. But in addition, Summer's introduced us to Suzanne Erickson, who runs a salon spa business right downtown Minneapolis, I think sort of in the epicenter of some of the issues that have taken place. And Suzanne Erickson, the spa is called Jungle Red?
Yep, Jungle Red.
Jungle Red. Fantastic. Well, Summer and Suzanne, thank you so much for joining us. So maybe, Summer, I could start with you. You're running a business in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Clearly, what happened in Minneapolis had a huge impact on everyone. Tell us what you, as a resident and a business executive in Minneapolis, sort of thought, and how were you impacted about what happened?
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, it's been really interesting. On a personal level, I did live downtown Minneapolis and thankfully moved out a month before COVID hit and moved into a suburb. I can tell you from a business perspective, it's been really interesting in Minneapolis. Certainly we had the shutdown like Toronto. We all had the in-shelter in place for several months. Now, there was a moment there, though, that we had the in-shelter lifted far before Toronto. And in fact, on May 5th, I went back to my office far before a lot of people who are in high rises in Toronto. And there were a lot of businesses that went back May 5th. It was really interesting. And so then we started to do business with people that were in their home and people that were in offices, so that, it wasn't like we were all in the same boat at that moment. Our business, Quartz Countertops, was deemed essential. So our manufacturing facility, which is in a small town, Minnesota, never shut down, thankfully. And our biggest, I would say, initiative during, and still is keeping all of our employees healthy at that plant. When you're making a product like ours, which is essential, and if you look at home renovations, people are at home dreaming, that's something where they were and are putting their money into, and our supply chain could not get disrupted because it would really disrupt our business. If our whole plant went down, we would have 2 weeks of disrupted manufacturing. And so we were very lucky, and we continue to be very diligent in keeping everyone safe at our manufacturing facility. We have over 550 employees. For 2 months, we did furlough half the company, and we really brought it down and just maintained. So we kind of took all the marketing down and we just maintained our operations. We did not disrupt any of the distribution channels. So we were able to continue. I would say by June 1st, we are back to full capacity, but we have less employees. I think, like many businesses out there, we've learned that we can operate with less people and function. I think
I'll come back and ask you some more questions about your business and how it's gone from a supply chain, et cetera, standpoint. But tell me, how did the riots impact you? The protests?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say from our business perspective, we really haven't disruption other than if there were any locations that sold Cambria in Minneapolis. I can tell you, Dan can share with you how it's disrupted her business. We do have a gallery that is located right downtown Minneapolis. We did have to board up. We had to close down. That didn't really disrupt the business and company overall, just because it was such an isolated location. The riot, though, I think in general, it really just shook people up. I mean, it was more of a psychological situation for everybody in our town. Yeah. And not just people downtown Minneapolis. I mean, I live in a suburb which is very similar to Oakville in distance from Toronto, called Edina. And Edina is like Oakville, wealthier community. And the weekends when that was going on after George Floyd, there were rumors going around that Antifa or anyone coming into town, we're going to go after the wealthy suburbs. So, that gets into your psyche. You have people buying guns and, really scared.
Seriously, so people were buying guns.
You couldn't get a gun. They were sold out. Oh yeah. I mean, it really got to that moment that neighborhoods were having group meetings. In fact, my kids, their father, I'm divorced. Their father lives in Minneapolis, blocks from when this is going on. He called me that weekend when everything was going down in Minneapolis and said, can you take the kids this weekend? Because our neighborhood has gotten together and we've heard that there's going to be some really bad things happening and we don't want the kids here. So
well, let's come back to you in a minute, but let's switch to Suzanne for a minute. Suzanne, your spa is right downtown Minneapolis?
Yes, it's right up of 10th and LaSalle, which is
how far away from sort of the epicenter of the killing of George Floyd and the protests, et cetera?
Well, it's probably about a half a mile, but the riots ended up coming down all the way into our area as well.
So tell me what happened to your business.
And
what was it like?
Many of the stores were looted. Exactly. The first riot, it was very frightening. I was like, I didn't even know what was happening. And our store was still closed because of the pandemic. And so I went next door to the stores next door and I was like, what's happening? Everybody's gone. And nobody said anything to me. And they're like, well, there's a riot coming. And I was like, a riot? They're like, yeah, like everybody's boarding up. And here I am in my store. I'm like, am I supposed to board up? And they're like, I don't know. And so basically I didn't know how to board up my store and I was freaked out. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to try to get my one product line out of here and then go. And basically I watched it from the news station and, they were, right by us, right next door, smashing up everything. I kept trying to call other businesses and see like, am I smashed? Am I broke into? And
were you?
Luckily I wasn't. I only had 2 windows broken, but it was very, very scary.
I can imagine. It was just incredible. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back more with Summer Kath and Suzanne Erickson in just a minute. Stay with us.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. Well, fascinating chatting with Suzanne Erickson, who runs a spa and a studio right downtown Minneapolis, and Summer Kath, who is executive vice president of a business that is located in Minneapolis and lived downtown Minneapolis, but moved out into one of the suburbs, comparable, I guess, to Mississauga or Oakville from a Toronto standpoint in Minneapolis. So maybe Susanna can come back to you. So I interrupted you just as we went to a message break, and you were talking about the night of the George Floyd death, and that you said these protests quickly turned into riots, and they were coming towards you, and people were warning you that you had to board up. Did you board up?
No, I didn't. But
so you didn't have to board up?
No, I was just fortunate. Like right next door, the block next to me was completely demolished. Right, like 10 feet away. So
really,
I was just very fortunate. Yes.
Why were some blocks demolished and other blocks weren't? It just happened to be where the protests went, or?
Yeah, I think so. And maybe because there was a liquor store on that block.
Brian, throughout Minneapolis, it didn't seem like there was a rhyme or rhythm of where they went. They would just kind of blanket and like go to an area or a strip mall and then skip over 2 streets and then take out another area. So it was just a crapshoot if you're going to be, in their destruction.
Now, you said you were glued to the TVs. Frankly, we were glued to the TVs here in Toronto. So it was something that, I think went worldwide very quickly. What did you do? Did you watch it on TV? Did you go watch it in person? What was it like being in the same city? It's your city that was sort of international news for a couple of days.
It was terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. Yeah. Like something out of a movie, not real.
Suzanne, did you go back to your studio? Did you stay at home? What did you do?
I went back the very next day. I wasn't going to go back during that time. And when I went back, it was just like, you know, just things were destructive all over the place. The whole one area was still up in smoke and burning in the town. It was very disturbing. Yeah.
And these protests continued for weeks, did they not?
I would say that entire week it did. Yes. Not at the level of what it was, but everybody was afraid. And I didn't even open my business. I was supposed to open my business that week, and my employees were too afraid to go back to work. And I was like, yep, okay, we can't do this to you emotionally.
And what's happened downtown now?
And people didn't want to come in. People didn't want to come downtown.
Yeah. What's happened downtown now? Is downtown come back? Is it resurgent? Is it still boarded up and destroyed in places? Describe downtown Minneapolis to us.
I felt like it was coming back until just recently on the second riot that happened. And then the rioters took out a whole nother section of Minneapolis and completely down Nicollet Mall, which is supposed to be our, beautiful area, street of people, businesses and.
Sorry, when was this? When was the second riot?
It was, do you remember the date of the second riot?
I think it's a month ago. It was about a month ago. There was a shooting in one of our parking ramps, and the police were hot pursuit to get this gentleman. He shot himself, but it kind of went out that the police shot him. And so all of a sudden the riots let loose again, and they took out some of our best retail on Nicollet Mall, which is where we had, was really the epicenter of downtown. Now that's all boarded up, it's smashed. It's really a sad sight. So
I saw an article that suggested that police stoppings of vehicles had gone down dramatically in Minneapolis since the protests and the riots. Are police afraid to stop people now, engage?
I believe they are. Yes. I mean, they don't want to be caught for something that they didn't do. Just like this last person that killed themselves on Nicollet Mall. They said it was the police that killed them. It was some girl on an interview that went out virally through social media very quickly, said the police did it. She saw the smoke from his gun. It was, not a question that the police did it. And instantaneously, that's what set off the riots. So if police are going to be blamed that quickly for something that they didn't do, I mean, I wouldn't want to be a police officer right now. And all the, they're getting such a bad rap, and we need them. We need the police.
So I think your mayor came out fairly quickly and suggested defunding police, but I think that some of the council people that had maybe initially said they agreed with defunding police are backtracking now. What's the status of that, and how does the population think about that?
Yeah, I was going to say, so today on Fox National News, they were actually citing the council members now backpedaling on what they said, saying that it was not interpreted properly. And I mean, it's ridiculous what they're coming out and saying as far as, no, they didn't really mean to defund the police. And they actually had a study of both Black and white people and who wants the police back at full force or more. And it was equal. White and Black people want them back at 100% or more. People are feeling very unsafe.
Now, I would have thought, and I visited your city a few times. I can't say that I know it very well. I wouldn't have thought that your city would have been a city with bad race relations. Has it been a city with bad race relations? What's happened and why, and where do you think it's going?
Personally, I don't believe it had bad relationships. I don't feel like we were, there was anything going on before COVID and these riots. I think we were a great city. And
so African Americans, Blacks and whites got along fine?
Absolutely. Like, at least, and I'm in the center of it. Like, I never felt fear before. And now I feel fear on my block every single day. And before that, it was just people mixtures going this way, that way. And I never had the feeling that I'm having now of being, I feel like I'm racist even though I'm not racist because of what's going on. Like, you know, judging where I shouldn't be judging, but because of this crime and the irate of these people coming out, it's scary.
But for people to react so quickly and negatively to what happened to George Floyd, there must have been some pent up, you know, pressure cooker anger. There must have been.
I do think it was there. I think it's not just Minneapolis. I think it's everywhere. But I also think that COVID maybe exacerbated because some people are in a situation where they're so down and out, or, you know, there's really no repercussions because, you know what, I've lost all my money. I don't have a job, and who cares? So let's just go do this because this is how I really feel.
Now, when
also they can get away with anything now. You know, no one's going to bust them. We can do whatever we want. And that's the feeling that's out there right now.
Really? Mm-hmm. Because it's sort of the national media attention that they can do anything with impunity.
Yeah.
And just call it protesting.
Really? So this is fascinating. So, you know, Summer, you live in the suburbs. Did the suburbs have a very different attitude than downtown?
I think that when we were in that week of major looting and crime and burning things, everybody was paralyzed in the Twin Cities because we were hearing rumors that, I mean, people were in buses coming from states all around here to come in and really set our city on fire. And also there was rumors they were coming to the suburbs where all the white privileged people live. And so everybody was scared. I mean, we wanted.
And they did visit some of the suburbs too.
They did. That's right. Yeah.
Now, are your suburbs regionally segregated? There's some suburbs that are primarily white and other areas that are primarily black.
I think we have a nice mixture, but it's pretty white in some of our suburbs. I would say Edina and Minnetonka and some of the other predominantly wealthy cities. I think Canada and Toronto is more of that, what you call the quilt, than we are of different.
A quilt or a mosaic, yeah, okay.
Yes, mosaic. Mm-hmm.
But, you know, I guess I would have, you know, and again, I visited your city, but I don't know it nearly as well as I probably should. My perception of what you're describing is sort of what I would have perceived in the southern U.S., not in Minneapolis, St. Paul. I would have thought you were far more integrated, but it sounds like you are reasonably segregated still.
I feel like we are now more than ever.
I beg your pardon?
I feel like we are now more than ever. I feel like we were coming more like together, personally myself. And
this has torn you apart.
Yeah, I definitely feel it has torn our city apart and made a lot of, you know, animosity between everybody.
In the news media of some of the protests, particularly, I guess there was some that were along a highway, expressway. It appeared that there were a fair amount of whites, particularly young whites, in the protests. Is that a reality, or is that just what the national media was trying to show us?
I would say it's a reality. I think this was a moment where a lot of the younger generation took that opportunity to come out and be a part of that protest. I think that's a generational thing. And I'm seeing that a lot. My daughters are 13 and 15, so they're not quite there, but I think that college students, from what I'm hearing, are really taking this moment to have a voice about it.
A voice in support of George Floyd, against the police, and in support of better race relations.
That's right.
Really?
Correct.
And what about the older generation? We just want to stay home.
Well, I think the older generation realizes more in depth what's going on, instead of the younger generation just taking on what they learn on social media through news. You know, they don't understand. They're just making a stand for something they don't understand enough about. And I feel like even the little store that was next door to me that got busted in, he was there the second time it got looted. And he said that these, you know, kids, he called them kids, were coming in, and they busted the first window of his store. And he said to the kids, please don't come in. I have nothing for you. If you want the egg rolls, you can have the egg rolls. They still came smashing through the window. And one of them was going to take down his family picture off the wall and smash it. And that's when he said, that's it. And he took out his gun at this kid and he pointed it at the kid. And he said, the kid was like, he could see in his eyes that he was petrified. And the business owner that was there, he's a young guy himself, said he took his gun and he just put it down and he started crying. He said, I couldn't do it. I saw the fear in the kid's eyes. So and he sat and watched them destroy his store.
And did they destroy the family picture?
I don't think so.
Well, it's a pretty compelling story that that the store owner picked up his gun, pointed it at the young kid, but couldn't pull the trigger.
Mm-hmm. He said, and their family's been in business for 30 years, and they're thinking about moving. 30 years, they put the whole family. Vietnamese.
So I presume it was a Chinese or Vietnamese restaurant?
Vietnamese, yeah. And
so did they target? Did the rioters target specific stores or establishments owned by non-blacks or just anybody?
Just anybody.
So black-owned stores were as ransacked as anyone else?
I would say all nationalities were ransacked, yes.
Mm-hmm. And you know, you both used the word riot right away. I used the word protest. So was it a riot right away, or did it start as a protest and become riot, or are we talking semantics?
Go ahead, Summer.
Yeah, I think we're talking semantics. I mean, it came out raging. I mean, there was definitely peaceful protesters. We've had them, we continue to have them. You maybe saw the moment when they all went out on one of our major freeways, and then a semi came through, you know. So there certainly has been the peaceful, but then I'm telling you, the riots, I would classify that as the people that came into town that wanted to loot, that just wanted to be evil because it was the moment that allowed them to do it.
My sense is Minneapolis, St. Paul is a city sort of far away from anywhere else. Where did they come into town from?
Chicago, Wisconsin, Midwest cities. I mean,
really?
Actually,
that's a long way.
People were seeing, I remember plates from all kinds of states, maybe even Florida. So yeah, I mean, I think it was because the spotlight was on us with George Floyd. People were willing to come from anywhere.
What do you think of the reaction of both the chief of police and your mayor? The chief of police, I think stood up not the same night, but fairly close thereafter, and it was sort of an apology, and the mayor as well. And I was quite impressed with their reactions, but it didn't calm things down.
I would tell you that people of Minneapolis were not impressed with our mayor's reaction. The lack of getting the National Guard out the night that it was the worst, there was a lack of response. And when he came forward, I think it was 4 a.m. after the first night, he was pointedly asked, who's in charge and what's the plan? Which is a pretty straightforward question. He did not answer either question. And that was the moment when everybody really lost faith in him as a leader.
We're chatting tonight with Summer Kath and Suzanne Erickson. Summer is a senior executive with a company called Cambia. Cambia what? Cambia?
Cambria.
Cambria. I apologize. And you do granite countertops for renovations and homes and things like that. And Suzanne Erickson, who is a spa and salon owner in downtown Minneapolis, St. Paul, called Red Jungle.
You might as well call it that now.
We're going to take a break for some messages and come right back with Summer and Suzanne in just a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. We're chatting tonight about Minneapolis, St. Paul, and the aftermath of the killing of George Floyd. We're talking with Summer Cath, who is the executive vice president of Cambria, a granite countertop company that's headquartered in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Summer used to live downtown, now lives in a suburb probably comparable to Mississauga or Oakville. And Suzanne Erickson, who has a studio, a spa, establishment right downtown, close to the epicenter of all of the protests and riots. Suzanne, what was the worst experience of this whole process?
Well, I would say COVID wasn't bad enough, and the riots weren't bad enough. And then I have a daughter that is pregnant, and she works with me. She's worked with me for 15 years. Was in the salon training on somebody. I ran an errand, and I get this phone call that something bad has happened in the salon. So I quickly go back to the salon, and what had happened is there was a gentleman came in without his mask on. And my daughter's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, legally we have to have you wear a mask." And so he said, he just left, and he comes back with a mask on. And he said, "Will this do?" And she said, "Yes, thank you. How can I help you?" And he said, "I need a tissue." And so she goes, "Okay, I'll help you with that." And she goes to get a tissue for him, comes back, and he's like creating chaos in the salon, calling everybody racist. And my daughter's, trying to diffuse this and being very sweet to him by saying, "No, we're not racist here," which we are not racist, and being very kind to him. And he looks straight at her stomach, which she's 5 months pregnant, looks up at her face and punched her in the face. He grabbed a big vase off of our shelf, big purple vase, and started running after her. And Kari's like, "Call the police, somebody call the police." She gets back into the back room, into the spa room, and he's holding this vase over her head going, "I'm going to fuck you up. I'm going to fuck you up," looking right at her. And she's like terrified. And she's like, "I'm just trying to help you, sir. I'm just trying to help you. Here's the tissue. See, I have it for you. I'm, just trying to help you." And I think he heard another girl out on the phone talking to the police. So it diffused him. He went out of that room, went right up to the other girl and punched her in the face, threw the vase at another girl. He started smashing up everything in the salon and grabbed a couple cell phones from behind the desk. They were just, petrified from this, what happened.
God, this sounds unbelievable. This is terrible. Yeah, I'm so sorry. Is your daughter okay? Is the baby okay? She's
okay. She was like, she was breathing very hard and nauseous and stuff like that, but she is okay. Yeah.
And the baby?
They did catch the guy because he had the cell phones, and so they were able to track the cell phones. And the police were great. They were so wonderful. And they said that this gentleman had been caught multiple times for theft before, but he's always gotten out. And so I don't know if he's now in jail or not in jail. The question is, why has he been continuously let out of jail every single time that he's been busted? He's very dangerous. And from this, I've lost multiple employees. It's just continuously one thing after another that I've lost my employees. People are afraid to come downtown. It's just, it's destructive. It's like putting my business under. And I've been there for 19 years, and I've had a really good business for a long time. And it was fine till COVID. It was is downtown, is your street a high-end street, a low-end street? What type of is this a lousy downtown or a nice downtown? No, it was definitely a nice downtown until just recently. Just since COVID, they turned one of our major hotels, which is 1 block away from me, into a homeless shelter. And so these homeless people are, I know that they have things wrong with them, mental issues, and they're, dependent on drugs and alcohol. But because of that, they're all in my block, and they're everywhere. And so, I feel bad for them, but it's ruining our businesses right here. Right.
Was this a high-end hotel or a budget hotel?
It was a high-end hotel.
And they turned it into a homeless shelter. That's amazing.
I'm sure that they probably needed the money probably from the state or whatever to keep the hotel going, but it's ruining our businesses around the area.
Does Minneapolis have a big homeless problem?
It was never like Chicago or, San Francisco or anything like that. We have some, but it seems for some reason, I'm not really sure why, that there's more and more and more. And I know people say it's because they're out of, so many people are out of work or this or that, but I'm not seeing that type of people in where I'm at on my street. I'm seeing more like, they have mental issues and they're, have substance abuse, and it's unfortunate, but it's definitely unfortunate for all of us.
So I'm really sorry to hear your story about your daughter and the assault that took place in your studio. It's almost it sounds though that people were using the race riots as an excuse to do theft.
Oh, absolutely. Yep, I agree 100%.
Which was sort of what, was the difference between the protest I was describing and the riots that you were describing. There's some element of the people that were seeing it as a cover that they could get away with anything and do anything and started ransacking. It certainly wasn't everybody, but there is a certain group of people that use the excuse of bad race relations or protests or whatever to go out and steal egg rolls or assault studios or go to liquor stores or we saw these pictures from Los Angeles where they were running out with Nikes and running shoes. I was appalled.
Yeah, that's what they were doing here too. Yeah, the stores here as well.
What is it? It's almost as if the societal solidarity and cohesion and the rights, like your attitudes of civil obedience have broken down.
With some people, yes.
What's happened?
I think people think they have the license. If you have the evil in you, it's coming out right now because they feel like there's a license and an umbrella that they can come under and they're protected. That really feels like that's the attitude, and it's everywhere, all the major cities.
But the perception is that there has been a race relations issue. Not just in the United States. Frankly, we've got it in Toronto. People have talked about it across the world, and whether it's systemic racism or racism or prejudice or whatnot.
But I don't think this is the answer. This isn't the answer. I don't know what the answer is, but this is definitely not the answer.
So what is the answer, Suzanne? What is the answer?
I don't know, but I'm not in charge of this.
Well, but you're in the front lines of it.
I know.
It's happening on your block and on the next block.
Yep. And I've written letters to the mayor and to, everybody I can think of, trying to say this, like, what is happening? What can we do? I get nothing back.
Do you think that blacks and whites mixed in Minneapolis?
Do I think that they do mix?
Did they mix?
I felt like they did personally, but I'm coming from a different place. I have family members that are married to black people. I have nieces and nephews that are black. I'm not prejudiced. So for me, it's probably a different story than maybe for somebody else. But I still don't see this as the answer. If this is how they felt, there could have been a different way of putting it, and not destroying businesses and maybe the people that are peaceful protesting, that's one thing, but
the riots,
even allow it to happen to get on that level is.
What about the police force? Did it have a reputation of being violent and assaulting black people without good reason?
I think Minneapolis probably did have some of that. I didn't know it at the time, but after learning this, I have found out that they did have that in them. But I still think that there's a different answer than coming down to this.
So it sounds like there's a greater division today between whites and blacks in Minneapolis. Is that true?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And one of the concerns in the last, couple of decades in the United States and in Canada was the sort of the hollowing out of downtown as the whites fled downtown and went to the suburbs. And then, for the last 10 or 15 years, people were moving back downtown, and there was a resurgence of downtown, both downtown shops and downtown living and downtown businesses. Is this going to see a reaction against that?
You know what? I read, there's a really good article in our Star Tribune, our local Toronto Star newspaper this weekend, and they had interviewed several different people that live downtown Minneapolis, and it was varied. There was an empty nester couple who recently moved to downtown about a year ago, and they still love it. They said I was surprised to read this article. They said there's still an energy downtown and we're going to stick it out. And then you have younger people who, want different things and are don't want to be stuck working from home in a tiny apartment, and they're moving out. So I think it's varied. I think there will be people that will stick it out, whether you're white or black or what race you are. And there will be those that don't want to deal with it. So I think it'll all come, I think it'll all correct itself eventually. I think the $1 million, question is when and what is the solution? Suzanne, you're right. No, if we had it, we could fix it now. And my daughter, who's 15, she was singing a song in my car this weekend, and I asked her, what does this mean? And she said, it means that all of you, older people, adults have made all these decisions, and you're leaving us with this to deal with as the younger generation. So I thought that was such an interesting perspective. It's a brand new song. And I think that the younger generation thinks that we've gotten us here and now it's yours to deal with. And I think that's an interesting attitude that they have. And
well, I do think it's interesting, and I'm not sure about Minneapolis, and certainly not in your riots, but in a lot of the protests that we've seen, and who knows whether the media are telling us the complete truth and giving us a great picture, because the cameras can only show a certain amount of what's going on. But I got the impression that there were a lot of young whites in the protests, the peaceful protests, and in fact, in a lot of situations, there were both blacks and whites that were stopping some of the rioters from trashing businesses and things like that. And so, I'm hopeful that the next generation are, if not colorblind, a lot less prejudiced and racist than past generations have been. And I do think that this is potentially a turning point. But you're right, Suzanne, to ransack buildings and to threaten your daughter, that's not the way to achieve these ends.
No.
We're going to take a break. We're chatting with Suzanne Erickson, the owner of Red Jungle Red, a studio and spa in downtown Minneapolis, and Summer Kath, who is senior executive with Cambria Countertops. And we're going to take a break for some messages and come back with some concluding comments in just a minute. Stay with us. Well, what a fascinating conversation with Summer Kath, the Executive Vice President of Business Development with Corporate Development, Business Development with Cambria Countertops. It's granite countertops that I want to get for my house, right? You promised me you'd give me a good deal, right? Right.
As long as you stop calling it granite and call it quartz. That's
I
right.
apologize. No, good correction. And Suzanne Erickson, who's going to cut my hair next time I'm in Minneapolis, St. Paul, right? Who runs the Red Jungle, the Jungle Red studio spa salon in downtown Minneapolis. What's the name of the street that you're on, Suzanne?
LaSalle Avenue.
LaSalle?
Yep, 13th and LaSalle.
Fantastic. Summer, you're in a Democratic state. How is this going to impact politics? Is Trump's law and order attitude going to win out, or is the concern about race relations and his handling of COVID-19 going to win out? What do you think it's going to? Where's the balance going to go?
That is another $1 million question, but how I would respond to it, and we're very close. I think we're 40 some days out of knowing what the future is there. But here in the States, the governors have all really had control over, how their economies are operating and how they shut down. Here in Minnesota, Governor Walz is our governor. I think he's done a so good job here. We have mask requirements, which I think have been very helpful in our numbers. But I do think that we were shut down for a good amount of time, and even, public schools aren't all back in school. Whereas South Dakota, our neighbor, Republican state, Christine Noem, she never shut her economy down. They kept going. And I even visited Sioux Falls last month because they had the first major sporting fan attended PGA tournament that Cambria is a presenting sponsor, and it was like a different world. They have no mask requirements. We were all together. There was thousands of people together on a golf course. I met the governor. She's lovely. She really cares about the economy continuing and kids going back to school. So there you've got two completely different states, and that's really how it's happening in every different state, whether it's a Dem or Republican. What's going to happen, after, on November 4th? No one knows. That'll be really interesting to see how, what happens and how that's going to blanket govern the whole United States and where we go into 2021.
And just out of interest, do you know what the difference in the infection rate or mortality rate in Minneapolis, in Minnesota versus South Dakota is? Which strategy worked better?
I think it's not exactly an apples to apples because South Dakota has a completely different population density. So I think that they have more, obviously, land to roam. But I do think, I think she made a really good choice because their infection rates are much lower than ours. We today are roughly between 700, 800 cases a day, and they are way below that. They are home to Sanford Health Systems, which is a huge, kind of like the Princess Margaret. It's a huge health system that's based in Sioux Falls. And so they've also been really serious as far as their testing and having readily available testing. So I don't think that's because of lack of testing. I think that they're just doing a really good job keeping it under wraps, and people are doing a good job and being diligent.
Your city was ransacked. It was on the international news for a while with pictures of destruction downtown Minneapolis. More conversations about police brutality or police treatment of blacks. Your city was under an international media microscope for a while. You've said that the mayor was criticized for not calling in the National Guard, the night of those first riots. Do you think that Donald Trump's sort of law and order card is going to play well with, maybe not with everybody, with the suburban whites?
I do. I personally do. I think that, but that is it's a big question, and a lot of people have different opinions about it in the United States. I can tell you that.
Give me a sense. What are the two opinions? If you were giving one opinion versus the other opinion, what would you be saying?
I think that I think it's politically charged because there's a lot of people that don't like Trump in the US. So I think there's that's in play here. But I think that, you've got our state where our governor and our mayor were slow to make decisions and we had an oversight to make a decision and protect people that we may have had less destruction. And what we saw was outrageous, and I would never want that to happen again to any city. And if that's going to take it over,
I've had a lot of people on my show that have seen what happened to George Floyd and the protests, and have seen this as sort of the catalyst to a major positive change in race relations. That white people have seen white privilege like they've never seen before, police brutality like they've never seen before, the image of someone's knee on someone's neck for 9 minutes, which was a sort of a visceral, personal kind of video that getting shot in the back is bad, but seeing, just like you were describing, Suzanne, your daughter's terrible situation. Seeing those videos was terrible, and I think it brought police brutality to people's images like almost never before. But then at the same time, what you've described in Minneapolis is a hollowing out of downtown, people scared to go downtown, people shuttering their shops, taking advantage of bad race relations or the perception of bad race relations to go on ransacking rampages or come in and try to steal from your spa, your salon. And people, some are in the well-to-do white neighborhoods that are buying guns and are worried about their safety. So in the end, is this good and will it lead to positive change, or is this bad and will lead to more racism and division? What do you think?
I think it's going to take a long time before it recovers and goes into good. I think that it's, and especially with the election and people being so, compromised one way or another way in the way they feel. People's feelings are so strong. It's unfortunately going to take a lot to get it to turn into the good.
Summer?
I would agree, but I do think there will be good that comes out of this. I think people are able to have confidence to have that voice that they didn't feel they had. And I think the generation, us and older, need to hear this and need to see it. Not saying that all of the destruction should have happened. It shouldn't. But it is what it is, and we have to go forward. And so I agree with Suzanne. I think good will eventually come from this, but I think we all have to be smart too when we move forward.
Summer, if I could have you speak for 30 seconds to Joe Biden, what would you tell him?
Oh my God. Can I pass on that one?
You need to think about it.
Would you tell him that he needs to have more law and order in his agenda?
I would.
That being so passive and accommodative toward the protests is wrong?
Yeah. Yes, I would agree with that. I think that it just seems that he's not really running his agenda. I don't think he has an agenda. He's running everybody else's agenda, and it's really hard to believe in that.
Suzanne, if I could give you 30 seconds to talk to Donald Trump, what would you tell him?
Keep going. You're doing a great job throughout all this. I mean, people are crazy now. And, yes, we need law and order. That's what we need. And somebody has to put it out there.
Well, Summer Kath of Cambria Quartz Countertops, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And Suzanne Erickson of Jungle Red Salon and Studio, downtown Minneapolis, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. We're going to take a break and come back with my concluding comments in just a second. Stay with us. Well, what a fascinating conversation tonight with Summer Kath. She's with a big company in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Suzanne Erickson, who's with a downtown small company in Minneapolis, St. Paul. And you know what? We've all watched on TV what was going on with George Floyd. And I do think that this very personal knee on the neck, 9 minutes, translated through social media, trillions of times, has had an impact on people's realization of police brutality like it's never before. But at the same time, the visions of these protests that may have started out peacefully that then ended up being riots and ransacking, whether it was downtown Minneapolis or, we saw them in lots of other cities across the United States, have also had an impact. And, with race relations on one hand and law and order on the other, where do you come out? And I guess where I come out is whenever you got a protest, there's people who are going to take advantage of it. And we can't let that in the end be the only thing we remember. We got to remember what was the cause of the original protests. And, I can go back to the G20 in Toronto, where we had people that came in from, all over, just as Summer was describing how people were being bussed in from all over and brought in all over. they came in from all over and were protesting absolutely everything. And that's not who Toronto is. That's not who the activists in Toronto are. We got perceived as that because that's what the media were showing, but that's not who we really were. And so we cannot allow ourselves to be completely prejudiced by pictures of bad, evil people using protests as an opportunity to go ransack. And no matter how terrible it was that Suzanne's daughter got assaulted, and it is terrible, that was one person, one bad person who took the situation in Minneapolis to their advantage to use bad race relationships as an excuse to go do what they were probably doing anyway, which was be a thief. So what's the answer of all that? I think we've got a race relations issue in North America, in Canada, in the United States, and we've got to do a better job of getting to know our Black neighbors. In Canada, we've got to do a better job getting to know our Indigenous people. In the United States, they called slavery the original sin. Well, in Canada, our original sin was probably the way we treated our Indigenous people, and we've got to do a better job on that. That said, in protests, don't allow those evil people to take advantage of the protests and go ransack buildings. Just don't let them, because they give us all a bad name. They give activists a bad name. They give politics a bad name. They give protests a bad name, and it's wrong. Anyway, that's my 2 cents worth. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Summer, Suzanne, thank you very much for joining us. It was really quite interesting listening to what was going on in Minneapolis, St. Paul. That's the show for tonight. Good night, everybody.